Welcome back to the channel, buddy, and I hope you're doing fine. Today we're gonna have a full review of Resident Evil Requiem. And believe me, that one's gonna be a banger.
That's too effective.
And as always, I have some timestamps prepared for you guys, so if you're interested in only specific topics, you can jump straight to them. And with that, let's go. Now I would say we start with the most important topic. What is Resident Evil Requiem actually? Resident Evil Requiem is the 9th part of a survival horror and action shooter series. The game is developed and published by Capcom. The main protagonists are Leon and Grace. The Resident Evil veterans are most likely very familiar with Leon, but Grace is a new character. In Resident Evil Requiem, we shift the focus away from the Winters family from Resident Evil 7 and Village, and we go back to the roots of the game. We even ended up in Raccoon City. For the main plot, people start getting infected by a mutated T-virus. This one is a bit special because the infected zombies retain some of their memories, and they try to mimic their previous behaviors. It's one way to explain how they can still operate chainsaws. Most of the time though, you will encounter this behavior by seeing the infected being stuck in their old life routines. Leon, as a DSO agent, and Grace, an FBI intelligence analyst, get sent to investigate the incidents. The game can be played in first person or in third person, it is up to you. The game recommends playing the game as Grace in first person and as Leon in third person. And that's what I did throughout my playthrough. As I mentioned already, the game got developed and published by Capcom. I think most of you will know Capcom. They are an absolute veteran when it comes to game development. They got founded in 1979. They are located in Japan and have over 3,000 employees. So we're talking here about an absolute heavyweight. I always like to mention this because when you review games, you kind of have to consider, is this like a one dude developing his game in a garage, or is it somebody who has like decades of experience and also the funds to make, hopefully, a good game. Alright, so now you know roughly what the game is about and who developed this. Of course, I can't spoil too much because maybe you want to play it yourself. Let's go though to story and immersion. The immersion in Resident Evil Requiem is just simply insane. The attention to detail when it comes to map and world building is peak. This sounds probably very stupid, but the attention to detail that they spent in making the map is so good right now. You start as Grace, and for the majority of the first half of the game, she will be your main character. Getting frequently placed at a disadvantage and having limited resources, paired with a rather fragile protagonist, are a good formula for a survival horror game. The way Leon gets introduced is 10 out of 10 goosebumps. Rarely do we see the chaos of the early stage of an outbreak, but this time we do, and it is epic. I will say this though, Grace and Leon play vastly differently from each other. Grace plays the horror experience, while Leon goes most of the time guns blazing and just straight up bulldozers through everything. He gets stealth takedowns, a huge arsenal on guns, and a huge amount of cheesy one-liners. Not hating on the last part, just observing.
Sorry, but I'm not on the menu.
Oh my god, so cheesy and so good. Did he eat a chair? During the second part of the story, the game undergoes a drastic shift in playstyle. Focus is now on Leon, and the horror aspect while playing Leon is limited. You still do play as Grace, but not as frequently anymore. The The game is packed with the typical Resident Evil elements, such as the little animations for using items and a little bit of, well, honestly, goof when it comes to getting some of the important upgrades. For example, you pay coins to get upgrade equipment, and infusing yourself with blueberry juice makes your guns do more damage. Yeah, okay, video game logic. But that is just Resident Evil for you. I don't mind this too much, and my immersion wasn't damaged by this. The story builds a lot on previous Resident Evils. Normally I tell my viewers that you can just play the game without any previous knowledge, but this time I highly recommend playing at least Resident Evil 2 first. If you don't have time to play that, I highly suggest that you watch a summary video. Otherwise, lots of the flashbacks and, well, old places that you visit once more might confuse you. As a veteran of the series, I absolutely love the entanglement with a lot of previous Resident Evil parts, but I can see this being a bit confusing for newcomers. Okay, so I explained now what Resident Evil is. We talked about the story and the immersion without, spoiling too much. Now, I would say let's dip into the actual gameplay experience. In case you're familiar with the Resident Evil franchise, you get Resident Evil. The issue with this is that Resident Evil wasn't always a pure horror game. Especially with Resident Evil 5 and 6, Capcom had a more action-heavy approach. So I will split this into two categories: the horror survival experience and the action experience. Let's start with the horror. Playing as Grace is exactly what I'm looking for in a horror game. You're not the kick-ass protagonist that just obliterates hordes of zombies and mutants before breakfast. You have a puny gun and you will encounter enemies that are straight up not meant to be killed or take some very precious resources to get rid of. During Grace gameplay you will be very vulnerable, and sometimes the game cranks it up to the max. For example, at one point in the story you must carry a small child, and the game completely disables anything you can do regarding combat. So all you can do is pray and dodge. You need to be resource efficient, and even then the game sometimes forces you to take a stealth approach. And I'm not complaining about that. This induces fear for the player, and that's exactly what a horror game is supposed to do. Now, the experience with Leon, as already mentioned, is completely different. Fuck it! BAM! Okay, they're still alive. Bad. Oh shit, this doesn't stagger them. I'm coughing, give me a second. Yeah. Stealth, baby. The game still has a horror setting, but it doesn't feel like it. It turns into an action game. Without telling you too much, later in the game Leon gets points for killing infected and can spend these points as a currency for upgrades and equipment. This arcade-ish feature is something that caught me a little bit off guard, to be honest with you, and I was not the biggest fan of that. The combat felt solid, and for the most part it's just a copy-paste from previous Resident Evils. And that is not criticism. There is no need to reinvent the wheel, in case you have already something good. The crafting is a choice. Grace can craft supplies by using infected blood and scraps. You get the blood by collecting it from enemies or big pools of blood, like in a bathtub or a bucket. On one hand, this was a nice mechanic because you had another resource to manage. On the other hand, this made absolutely no sense. Blood plus scraps equals ammunition. But hey, we are playing a game and Resident Evil did weirder things. So I don't want to argue too much here. With Leon it all makes a bit more sense because he finds actual gunpowder. And as per usual, you can find collectibles, tiny raccoons in this game, for unlocks and achievements. Most of them are very easy to find, but some of them are vicious. little shit. Okay, that one is actually... I sadly ended the game with 24 out of 25. The controls are sufficient, you have a quick turn hotkey, and in first person you can lean around corners and peek through leaned doors to gather some intel about your enemies. And this worked surprisingly well. The option to get actual stealth kills as Leon was entertaining, and boy, some of the reloads are sexy as hell. To finish this chapter, I have to say that Capcom nailed it for the most part. I preferred the horror part, but Leon was a very enjoyable character, and going guns blazing every now and then was indeed a pleasant change. Another important topic that we need to talk about is difficulty. And well, the game is easy, at least for me. And while this does sound a little bit high and mighty, let me explain. At the beginning, you have 3 difficulties: Casual, Standard Mode, and Standard Classic. Casual is, well, relax while enjoying the story and puzzles. Standard is a balanced experience of suspense and accomplishment at the standard difficulty found among modern Resident Evil games. This game mode can be changed to Casual on the game over screen. Nice. And then this is the one that we played, the Standard Classic, a traditional experience with a difficulty similar to classic Resident Evil games, recommended for long-term fans of the series. Autosaves during Gray's gameplay are limited and ink ribbons are required to save, so this is really the old school approach. You can see Insanity here. This will be hidden when you start the game for the first time, because you unlock this after finishing the game for the first time. So we did play on Standard Classic. That was the highest difficulty that I could select at the beginning. But honestly, not once was my gameplay impacted by this. I always had enough resources to save. The few moments I actually did die was because I lacked information about how to solve an engagement. My deaths very quickly showed me what I did wrong, and no encounter took more than 1 try, at max 2 tries. Now I understand that this might not be the case for everybody. Chat told me that it's no surprise that the game is easy for somebody who plays shooters for a living and who played almost every Resident Evil game there is. For people who only occasionally dip into shooter games, it might be a challenge. And on top of that, I didn't play the insane difficulty yet. But in case you're worried the game might be too difficult for you because you normally don't play horror games or shooter games, I think it's safe to say that you will not get stuck anywhere when you play on Casual. So even non-veterans can enjoy the game.
Time to clear up the rest.
Now let's talk about performance, and this is a very pleasant chapter because this is 10 out of 10. Crashes? None. Not a single one. Bugs? None. Nothing. Not even a visual glitch. I had 0 issues. Day 1, we played it, and it just worked. A game working the day it gets released. No day 1 patch, no hotfixes or anything. Quality, man. The game run absolutely stable, no hiccups whatsoever, smooth gameplay. I will blend in my specs real quick so you can compare them to yours. Honestly, what else is there to say? Not much, it just works. Let's move on. So, next, let's talk about audio. And this will be a little bit weird. When it comes to sound effects, the game delivers. Ambience music is good. I'm saying good and not an absolute banger, because never I really stopped my game and just sat there and listened to the music. With the exception, of course, you know, the song during the credits. A good user interface and good music is kinda taken for granted, and you only really talk about these points when they're bad. So not the case here, the audio is just rock solid. And this is a chapter that I will enjoy really a lot. Let's talk about what I enjoyed while playing Resident Evil Requiem. And my god, there is so much. I will start with the smaller things. I'm just a sucker for the cute little animations for using items. It's so simple, but it screams Resident Evil. The immersion, no matter where, was absolutely fantastic. Since I played Resident Evil 2 back in the days on the PlayStation 2, and I also played the Resident Evil 2 remake, it was quite the nostalgia trip going back to Raccoon City, especially the police station and the orphanage. I was a little bit disappointed with Resident Evil 5 because Resident Evil started to feel like an action game and not like a horror game. I get it, and we'll probably see it in the comment section. It was a good co-op game, but that's just not what I'm looking for in this franchise. I skipped 6 and then returned for 7 and 8, so I'm delighted to get the survival horror feeling in Requiem. The gunplay was nothing too crazy, but just rock solid execution. And what really impressed me were these tiny details, for example when Grace is shooting the Requiem. You can see she struggles with that a little bit. Talking about execution, the finishes you got with the guns were awesome. Ah, dude, that was cool. The user interface is very minimalistic and does not get shoved in your face. Stuff that you don't need outside of combat fades away, and there's just a character and your game. That's it. User interfaces are very often never praised. You only hear about them when people complain. So as long as nobody complains, you did a good job. But I decided to rate the user interfaces in my reviews because apparently a lot of devs don't know how to build a good one. Not the case here though, passing with flying colors. I'm neutral regarding the crafting. It's there, it works, it's weird. Infected blood was definitely a choice. What I also appreciated were the different locations. Sometimes you don't get a change in scenery in your game, but Requiem takes you from cities to labs to ruins and other interesting places. And some events here and there to keep it spicy. The controls in first person were crisp, especially the leaning is something that I enjoyed. I don't know how I felt about you kind of being invisible while peeking around the corner, because it's not just a tiny peek, you're actually aiming around the corner, so they should see you, but they don't. But I think that is, from a gameplay point of view, good enough. Alright, and now, no game is perfect, and Resident Evil Requiem is no exception. So, what would I like to see improved? Let's talk about it. Something that is probably just a me thing, I wished for an actual hard difficulty from the start. I was a bit disappointed that the ribbons as a resource absolutely didn't matter. I said it already during my stream, it feels nowadays that lots of games don't dare to give us an actual hard mode from the start. Because people get upset when they pick hard modes and might review bomb if they can't beat the game. But that's what a hard mode is. Not everybody is supposed to beat hard. It is an achievement, not a participation trophy. That's why we have standard and casual modes. Where everybody's saying, well, now you have insane difficulty, just play that. I don't play story games more than one time. I know the story now, the tension is gone, everything is revealed. If I had unlimited time, I would play it. But life is busy. I simply don't have the time for another playthrough. Or let's just say I prioritize other things higher. Another thing that almost annoyed me were the action parts. I wanted Resident Evil, and I got Resident Evil Horror with Grace. But Leon is an action game. I think it worked out at the end because Leon is a character we all know, and he is just the king of aura farming. A completely new protagonist for the action parts? I think that could have become an issue. But none of this is really a big issue and will not cost the game any points in the rating. It's more like a personal bias. There's one thing though that I did have an issue with. While I absolutely love the Resident Evil charm, the old sound effects, the basically untouched inventory system and everything, I wish the game would modernize a tiny bit. I ended up in a dead end once and got cornered by zombies because Grace can't vault over a dining table. This is stuff that felt okay 20 years ago but feels really meh today. Same with some of the logic of the game. Yeah, I know logic in Resident Evil is not the best fit, but there are a few elements that absolutely annoyed me. You can't put a child down to whip out your gun and shoot. The protagonist chooses to die before putting down a child barefoot on the cold floor. And when you have a full inventory and you find important items, you must destroy something out of your inventory to pick it up, because you can't put something from your inventory in the container you just looted, or you maybe just drop it on the floor. Nah, can't have that. So if you're a loot goblin like me, you must backtrack to your stash, deposit all the things, and then run back. It just felt exhausting. Just drop the 2 spare bullets on the floor and I grab it later when I pass the section again. And I almost forgot, there is actually one more thing that I almost didn't put in the video that rubbed me the wrong way. And that is, the game tries, and I'm not gonna tell you when and what exactly is happening, the game tries to give you options that you can do A or B, but at the end of the day, your choices didn't matter at all. And that is something that is like, just go with the linear approach then, because I replayed the passages where you could change something and either it did nothing or, well, path A was very disappointing and you very quickly realize the moment you pick option B, yeah, this is what the game kind of wants you to pick, and then you get the actual story. Next chapter, let's talk about playtime and replay value. According to Steam, I finished the game after 16.5 hours of playtime, on the highest difficulty available during the first playthrough. That is not too bad for a horror game, especially since it never felt like a drag. Sometimes horror games can feel repetitive. It was not the case with Requiem. When it comes to replay value, it's a bit of a challenge for me. Yes, you can play it once more and try to get all the challenges done and get all the collectibles, etc. But for me the game is a play once and be done. But that being said, if you want to go for the highest difficulty and more challenges, you will easily end up with 30 plus hours, which is a pretty good deal for a horror game. Ah yes, and now, let's go to the fun chapter. Should you buy the game? As always, the only thing I can give you is information to make your own decision. If you're a fan of Resident Evil, Requiem is a no-brainer. If you're a fan of horror games in general, then Resident Evil Requiem is still a no-brainer, after polishing your knowledge about the game to make sure you're not getting confused too much. Although I'm not sure if it was the right choice by Capcom to try to please everybody with the survival horror and the action split, I can't deny that I had crazy fun with this game. Let's rate the game. Ratings are of course heavily biased because we all have different preferences. Makes sense, right? I would rate Resident Evil Requiem a 9.5 out of 10. This is a top of the line ranking, especially since I think I never gave a 10 out of 10 yet. And the minus 0.5 only comes from some of the old school Resident Evil flair baggage that the game still didn't decide to drop yet. The game has a hefty price tag with 69.99 euros in my region, but it was worth it. I sadly bought games with a higher price tag and they were absolutely not worth it. What do you think about the game? So you heard all my opinions. Share yours. Let me know in the comment section below. Also feel free to share the video everywhere where you want to. The channel is small and a little bit of help, a little bit of a boost goes a long way. And with that, let's roll the outro. So yeah, I'm reviving this channel now, and of course, my dear patrons, thank you very much. You're giving me the option to do more than just Hunt Showdown on the main channel. So this is very much appreciated. You guys are awesome. And then as always, if you want to connect with me, with my socials, there's a link tree in the description below. Feel free to check that out. And at the end, there is not much more to say. I hope we can fill this here with some recent uploads very soon. There is still Styx that I want to review, also Cairn, and we are playing a little bit Slay the Spire 2. I will not do a full review of that one, but I can see myself making a first impression video. And with that, I see you in the next one. Until then, have a good day and bye-bye.